Kathy Law, and this is an episode of Law on a Gravel Road. First, I'd like to thank all the support I've received from people that have viewed and listened to our podcast thus far, and appreciate that, and hope you tell your friends and family about that. If you're interested in rural practice, we want to get the message out about rural practice in Iowa and about the attorney shortages. My guest today is Mike Mahaffey. Mike is a rural attorney. He has a law office in Montezuma, Iowa that he started in 1978, I believe.
That's correct.
And so Mike's been down there practicing since 1978, and now he has two law offices. He went in with a person that had an office in Grinnell, and now he has offices in Grinnell and in Montezuma. So Mike, welcome, and thank you for taking time to visit with me today.
And just so you know, Kathy, and everybody knows, I live on a gravel road.
That's awesome.
Okay, my wife and I have an acreage west of town, so yeah.
Great, that's perfect. Well, we came up with that name. It's like, that has to be the name.
Yeah.
So I love it. So why did you decide to become an attorney in the first place?
There was actually three people that were instrumental in that. Two real people and one fictional person. In 1962, the movie To Kill a Mockingbird came out, and I remember seeing that, and obviously we all enjoyed seeing Gregory Peck play Atticus Finch. Then, a couple years later, when I was in high school in Osceola, Bob Reynoldson was a good friend of mine, and his father, Ward Reynoldson, was practicing law in Osceola, and his mother, Jan, was going to law school at that time at Drake. So she would come home and talk about going to law school, and then, of course, Mr. Reynoldson would come home and from a law practice, and I got a chance to tell him shortly before he died, when he was in hospice, that I said, you and your wife were examples of lawyers that I wanted to be like. I said, and Atticus Finch, and Mr. Reynoldson said, oh, he said, well, it's pretty good to be in company with Gregory Peck.
That's true.
Yeah, but that was kind of, I'm the first lawyer in my family. So, in terms of what happened after that, obviously there were other things that made me think about going to law school. But that's kind of when it started, when I was a young teenager.
I always wonder what kind of plants that seed in somebody. For me, I was on debate team in high school, and there was a guy at another school that said he wanted to be a lawyer, and I thought, I'd never even thought about that. Never had even occurred to me. I thought, well, maybe I could do something like that. Right. So that's all it took, was one person mentioning it.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about your practice in Montezuma.
Well, it's a general practice. Now, we don't do everything. We don't do taxes or bankruptcies or social, security, disability work. One of the things you learn after a period of time in a small town is you can do many things, but you can't really do everything, because if you try to do everything, I think it just doesn't work out. So we have a practice. We do some litigation, I'd say business litigation, some personal injury work. We also do probate, estate planning, and trusts, quite a bit of real estate work, and we represent a lot of what I consider to be mom and pop corporations, the LLCs and the corporations where somebody's an excavator, and and we do work for them, and or our farm corporations or other people from all walks of life. So it's a varied practice, which makes it challenging but also interesting.
Did you know when you went to law school, did you envision that you would go to a practice somewhere in rural Iowa, or were you looking at all types of things? What were your thoughts at that time?
That's a good question. I went to law school at the University of Kansas, and my senior year, I was third year, I was thinking about what I was going to do, and I had a law school professor, a very nice man named Paul Wilson. And Professor Wilson told me to go to talk to one of his friends in Lawrence, which I did, because everybody likes college towns. But he wasn't ready to hire somebody yet, and he'd had an intern from the class after me. So at that point, I thought, well, I'm from Iowa, so I think I'll go back to Iowa. And I looked mostly in smaller towns, because I just thought that would probably suit me better. And I talked to a lawyer in Grinnell who I had just hired somebody, but he said, there's somebody down the road in Montezuma that needs a lawyer. So I ended up interviewing with him and worked with him for a couple of years, and then set up my own law practice in Montezuma in 1978. But I had no problems with going to a small town. I'd lived in Sioux City, which for Iowa is a fairly good-sized town, but I'd lived in a lot of small towns. My father was a public educator. We moved around a lot. So, but I had a grandfather who farmed in northwest Iowa. I used to like to go visit my grandfather, and I would lie awake and listen to the crickets chirp, and I thought to myself, because we always lived in town, small towns, but in town. I wouldn't mind living out in the country sometime. So we moved to Montezuma. We rented a place north of town for a while, and in 1987, we bought a place west of town. So I've lived on a gravel road for a long time.
It's interesting that you say that. Our son Jonathan practices in Jefferson.
Yes.
And lives on our family farm, but he lived with us in Des Moines while he was going to Drake. And when he moved back out there, the thing he liked the most was that it actually gets dark at night and it's quiet. He said nothing like going outside and you can actually see the stars.
You can, yeah.
And just the sounds and everything. He said he didn't realize how much he had missed that.
Yeah, that I can understand it. We, a couple of years ago, put a new sunroom on our house, and it's great to be out there early in the morning. It's great to be out there late at night to see what's going on. It's great to be out there when it's raining and when it's snowing, and I agree with your son. You can see the stars.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
How has your practice changed over the years from when you started? Has it evolved in some ways? You don't do certain things now, or just...
I would say yes, to some extent. When I started out, I did do some taxes, but I didn't particularly like doing taxes. And we're fortunate in Poweshiek County to have a lot of CPAs, good CPAs that did taxes. So I kind of, got out of that. I decided early on I didn't want to do bankruptcy work. Nothing wrong with it. It's very honorable. But when you practice in a town like Montezuma, you represent too many creditors.
Yeah.
So, I also served for many years as a part-time county attorney. So, did that work. I would just say over the years, probably one of the things that I do more of than I did to begin with, and part of it is just as we get older, is more estate planning and probate work, which I enjoy. And again, as you get older, your clients get older, and so there's been some areas that I do more of than I used to.
For attorneys like me, I'm from rural Iowa, but I've only practiced in Des Moines.
Right.
And other attorneys that have only been in a larger city. What are some of the benefits that you see of practicing in rural Iowa that we probably don't get to experience?
Our office in Montezuma is 2 minutes from the courthouse. So I look out my window and I see the Poweshiek County Courthouse. I think it's the second oldest courthouse still in use in Iowa, 1846, and it's had a lot of restoration. But I can look out my window and see the courthouse. I'm pretty sure because of being county attorney and also civil practice, I think I've probably tried more cases in that courthouse than any other lawyer. But it's there's a symbolism to it, but there's a practicality to it too. The symbolism, I look out there and I see there's the courthouse. There's where the law is made in terms of district court. And I also just think from a practical standpoint, how fortunate am I to be 2 minutes from the courthouse? In the old days, Kathy, as you know, we used to go over and have court service day. And the lawyers would gather and we would see the judge, and he or she would sign our orders. We don't have that with EDMS. But I still go over every once in a while to say hello to the judge that is there. And the one that's there now said, I always expect you to come over, Mr. Mahaffey.
Probably enjoy it because they don't get as much personal interaction.
As much, yeah. But that's one thing that's been very, and we practice in other counties too, but just that proximity, that closeness has always been something that I've enjoyed.
How does practice in a small community, if it does, allow you to have a different impact on clients and community than maybe an urban attorney?
Yeah, and I can't speak as an urban attorney. I think you can develop good relationships with your clients too. In a small town, lawyers should and are expected to be leaders in different capacities. And you really do develop a very special relationship with your clients. I've been doing this long enough, Kathy, that I realized the other day that there's a few families that we are doing work for the fourth generation of the family.
That's incredible.
It is, and the people know us. They know us. They ask about how everybody in the family is. I ask about everybody in their family is. If they see me, particularly these days, if they see me with a suit and tie on, they say, "Oh, you must be going to court today, Mark." Okay, and I say, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I am." Or I said, "I'm going to Des Moines." "Oh, they like to dress up in Des Moines, don't they?" I said, "Yeah, they do like to dress up more." So, yeah.
I think it gives a great deal of comfort to the clients. I mean, I have some farmers are some of my favorite clients. I have lots of farmer clients, but I've had some of that where I've developed relationships over 20 years, and I think they feel more comfortable. They know you, they trust you. When they come in, it's like talking to a friend, and it takes some of that stress away, because most people don't say, "Oh, good, I get to go talk to my attorney today about something."
No, I think
it's usually not something they are excited. Maybe they might be excited about if it's a new business or something, but lots of times it's a very stressful time in their life.
It is,
and that they know you, know their family.
Right.
You have history there. I think that makes an incredible difference.
I had a client that recently lost his wife, and she was only in her 60s. And I was talking to him about what needed to be done. He lives in Newell, Iowa, but he grew up around our area. And when we got done, he said, "You still going to practice law for a while longer?" I said, "I am for a while longer," but he knows because he's been a client for a long time. He said, "It's going to be a sad day for me when I can't call and talk to you." And you can't put a price on that, Kathy.
Exactly.
You just can't. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you've built a really successful practice where you are over the years. What do you think are some keys to being a successful rural attorney?
Well,
or are they different than other attorneys?
I don't know, but for being a successful lawyer, don't make promises you can't keep in terms of when you're going to get the work done, Kathy. As you get busier, which, when I was when I first started my practice, I was like the Maytag repairman, it was a little lean for a couple of years. Be sure to be honest with people about what you can do. And I think the other thing as we get older that we're probably better at, a couple of things. You become a better listener. They don't necessarily need to hear from you everything about the law or any $10 words that you can use. You listen to what they have to say to you and what they are saying and what they're not saying. And I think that's very important. And you be honest with them. Sometimes it's important to say to a client, I don't think we want to go to court on that. And many people, as you know, really don't want to go to court. I think we want to see if we can try to get this settled. And sometimes people are very upset about something that has happened in their life. And their immediate response, understandably so, is, gosh, I want to, And I say to people, well, there's two ways to spell principal. One is P-L-E and the other is P-A-L. And I said, how much P-A-L principal do you want to spend to prove the principal P-L-E? Because I said, sometimes it's not worth doing that. Okay, and they respect that. I don't tell them. I say this is your case, but based on my experience, maybe we should try this first.
That's great. I had never heard that analogy. I'm going to have to use that. Has your practice evolved over the years to changing needs in the community, or how have you seen that kind of evolve?
Things don't change quite as much in small towns as you know, Kathy. But it does. I would say that there's probably among younger generations perhaps more anxiety about things than there was maybe 25, 30 years ago. And rightfully so. I'm not blaming anybody for that. Younger people today, whatever they do for a living, I mean, the cost of everything is higher. There's, raising children, for example. There's so many more things that can go wrong, if you will, with social media and things. When I was growing up, and even our older children, you didn't have that. And so there's the social media is a blessing and a curse for people, including our clients. So
what I've been working on in my presidency, and you know that, is trying to encourage people to go to rural Iowa and see how we can help rural practitioners. One thing you've been very successful with is you have two young attorneys,
yes,
or three? Two young attorneys in your firm. One's your son.
Yes.
Did he always want to come back to the firm, or how did he end up coming back to practice?
I'll tell you that story, how I first found out. He initially said he wanted to be a teacher and a basketball coach because he played basketball in high school and a couple of years in college, and he really enjoys sports and basketball. And I thought that was fine. We have 3 children, and our 2 sons are both lawyers, and I honestly never put any pressure on them to do that. I don't think that's a good thing to do, because I've seen people who are doing things because their father wanted them to, and that doesn't always work out, Kathy, as you know. So, but I was listening one day, he was talking to some people, and I had an inclination of this, but they said, well, what do you think you're going to do when you get out of undergraduate school, PJ? He said, well, I think right now I'm thinking about going to law school. And they said, oh, why do you want to do that? And he said, well, I'd like to help people like my dad does.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So
that's the best compliment you can get.
It is. And I'm glad to have him with me. And then we have another young man who went to Grinnell College with PJ. And his wife is a good friend of PJ's wife. And he has a couple of good friends that are dentists in Grinnell. So it helps to have those connections. But I'm very thankful for that, because the time is coming when I will be retiring, and having a couple of young people in is a blessing. It just is.
The newer attorney at your firm, did he practice somewhere else first?
Chicago.
Okay,
Chicago,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So what made him want to leave Chicago and come to Iowa?
I think part of it was the personal connection he had with PJ and his friends that are the dentists. And I've talked to him about that since, because he's been with us since last fall. He was in some larger litigation firms, and he enjoyed that. But he said, Chicago's, he said, I was ready to get out of the city. He grew up in a town about the size of Grinnell in Wisconsin, so that maybe helped some. He enjoyed practicing in Chicago, but he said, it's a lot tougher in terms of dealing with, you just don't have the personal relationships. So I think that there were personal reasons, and I think he decided maybe I'd like to go try to practice in a smaller town. We're thankful for that.
I am too, and to have somebody come in that has some experience is
Yes.
wonderful too.
Oh, indeed.
You don't have to spend as much time training.
That's right, yeah.
One of the things we've talked about at the Bar Association is, we want to get new attorneys, young attorneys to go to rural Iowa, but I think there's a market for people that are maybe mid-career or have gone somewhere else, and maybe you want to come back home to raise kids, or they have elderly parents, or different situations. I talked last fall, I had an attorney reach out to me. He's practicing up in Northwest Iowa, somewhere around Spirit Lake. He practiced in Des Moines for years and decided he just wanted something different.
Right.
And he absolutely loves it. Opened up his small shop, and he said, I'm the boss.
Right.
The first time in his life he'd had that. How do we convince, or how do we get more mid-level attorneys or people that have left Iowa? How can we convince them that that might be a good option for the next phase of their life?
That's as you know, a very good question, and one we struggle with. I have clients in other areas, business, for example, or whatever, that have actually done that. We have a couple of people that have moved back or have moved to Iowa from California, where things are so expensive. And one of the things a small businessman who moved from California told me years ago was, you know, the good thing about modern technology is you can do work any place in the world from any other place in the world.
Yeah.
In terms of lawyers particularly, one of the things I think we have to do is just get them to at least come to rural Iowa and look at it. It is different. You know, many of the rural lawyers say to me, we post things at the University of Iowa, we post things at Drake, Creighton. We don't get any response. You know, we just don't get any response. Part of that, I think, very honestly, is that the debt coming out of law school is far greater than it was for you and me, Kathy, okay? And that's something that you have to try to address, because the starting salaries in rural Iowa aren't going to be as much as they're going to be in Des Moines or Chicago or Minneapolis. So I know we're trying to work on that. The bar's trying to work on that. But I think part of it is just to get people to come and see what it's like. You know, sit down and talk with us and see if we can work something out. Practicing in Des Moines isn't for everybody. Practicing in Montezuma isn't for everybody. What we really need, though, is, as you know, we need more lawyers in Iowa. We just do.
We need more lawyers everywhere in
Absolutely.
Iowa. That was what shocked us when we started doing our research, because we kind of thought, you know, Des Moines has plenty of attorneys.
Right.
And we do, but there still aren't enough.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the general public probably thinks there's too many attorneys in general, but, you know, that was one thing that shocked us. But I think we're missing that market, because sometimes I think students maybe are scared of rural Iowa because they're scared they won't have mentorship, or, you know, they won't have a bunch of attorneys to teach them. But, you know, that can happen well in a rural firm too. Like Allie Bedwell, we just interviewed, she's had great mentors in rural Iowa.
I'm glad you asked that question, because that is true. There aren't maybe as many, but when I was a young lawyer, I'll give you an example, and I know you know who this is. Orville Blathy in Victor, Iowa. Orville was a fine lawyer. He was even a better man. Yeah. Orville Blathy, I could call Orville at any time and talk to him about things. Sometimes if I was doing a federal state tax return, I'd go over there and I'd say, now Orville, you charge me for this, you know, but I'd like you to look at this with me. And he'd charge me like $80 or something. He was always willing to help young lawyers. And those of us that are older in Iowa, we're always glad to talk to people. Nobody can do it on their own. I had several older lawyers that helped me when I set up my practice. They were very helpful to me, sending me, you know, they were older. They said, you know, I don't need to do this estate anymore. Why don't you do it, Mike? There's still people out there like that. So I hope that maybe people will, after listening to this podcast, realize there are people in rural Iowa that can help also. One
thing we found, rural practitioners, you know, have a hard time getting people to come sometimes if they do submit things to law schools. Is there anything rural practitioners can do to kind of better set themselves up for success? For example, sometimes we have attorneys call the bar office, sometimes rural attorneys, and they say, I want to know what I can sell my firm for.
Okay.
And we ask them, are you willing to have somebody come in and mentor them for a couple of years? Or, you know, what are the circumstances? And it's usually, no, I want to retire in 6 months.
Right. I think,
what are some things we can do to help better position them to get somebody to come there and take some of those barriers away?
Perhaps we can diplomatically and gently say, if you're going to do that, why don't you plan it over a year or two rather than just 6 months? I think what happens, many places, but in rural Iowa, people get tired. And they maybe have some health problems, and they're solo practitioners, and they're thinking, I don't know I just can't do this too much longer. And I realize that happens sometimes because of medical or, you know, health urgency.
Yeah.
But I think if you plan for that, it makes things obviously easier. And there are, just like there are in Des Moines or Cedar Rapids, where there's plenty of opportunities in rural Iowa, just like your son tells you, we have plenty of work. I mean, we have plenty of work, and we're glad to do it. Sometimes we're to the point where we have to turn away some work. if we had some other young lawyers around, just like they did with me when I was young, and say, hey, Mike, do you want to do this? Oh, sure, I'll do that, you know.
I think one of the things that the bar can work on too is educating attorneys that if you want to turn over your practice to somebody, these are the things that you have to be willing to do.
I agree.
And maybe 5 or 10. Let's think about this 10 years out.
Right.
And start planning for that. So maybe 3 years before you want to retire, you start looking for somebody to take over, or developing those relationships. And I think I think that's what we have to try to educate people on.
Right.
Is that you can't just turn this around. You can't expect a young person to come.
No.
Sight unseen, buy a building. They've got massive student loans.
Right.
You want them to buy a building for maybe $100,000, $500,000, or whatever, and then they're not guaranteed those clients because they have no relationship with them.
I couldn't agree with you more. And don't wait until you're so tired.
Yeah.
And because that happens in life. You just say, I'm just tired of this. I just don't want to do this anymore. Because then a young person comes to talk with you and thinks, oh, boy, I don't know about this. It doesn't sound like he's really enjoyed doing this very much.
That's true. They're probably not the best advertisement for their own
themselves.
Firm. Yeah. So I think that's something that we can work on.
Absolutely.
And people in Des Moines need that education too.
Sure.
Because everybody has succession planning, and they just need to think about that more. So you're ready.
I think we need to also, Rick Lynch talks about the fact that we should start talking to the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. I think, and I know you're trying to do this, Kathy. Go out and talk to people about what it's like to practice law wherever you practice law. Here's what it's like. Okay, let me tell you, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat, but here's what it's like to practice law, and here's what it's like to be part of your community. Okay.
I think that's one of the biggest benefits. Is I think communities need rural attorneys, because you mentioned it before. Attorneys are the leaders in a lot of communities. Yes. They're the ones that run for school board, or on the city council, or they do lots of work for nonprofits and different people in the community that can really help them set them up for success. If we don't have lawyers in those communities, those people are not, they're not going to get the help they need to keep their city going and advance things.
So on July 4th this year, I will march in the Montezuma 4th of July parade with the Sons of the American Legion. And then after that, I'll change shirts and I'll go over with the Montezuma Lions Club. And it's our annual chicken barbecue where we serve 700 to 800 chicken dinners. A big fundraiser, of course. And I'll do that, and then I'll go home and take a nap probably because I'll be tired. But those are the things, at any age, they still want you to be part of the community.
And that's part of the great thing about it.
Yes, it is.
It is. It's a lot of work, but those bonds you have with people, and it's just, you can't beat that.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
No.
Really good. So what would you say to a younger attorney that maybe is curious about rural practice but hesitant? Is there any piece of advice you could give them?
Well, two things, I think. Number one, just go out and talk. I mean, if you see something on the board at Iowa or Drake or someplace, and somebody says, I'm interested in hiring a younger person, go out and talk. First of all, give rural Iowa a chance. See if it may be something for you. And then the other thing I would say, based upon 51 years of experience, is I am thankful that I stayed in Montezuma, Iowa. I've made a good living. I've had a good life. I still go home at night and, with my wife and our dog, and can still see the stars. And I will die, when I say this, I think you'll understand, I will die a free man. I didn't have to spend a lot of time with management meetings or determining who was going to be the partner or things like that. Those things are fine for larger firms, but I didn't have to do that. I answer to God, my wife, the law, the community, and my clients. And I'm thankful for that, okay?
That's well said. One last thing I'd like to ask. You mentioned that you've made a good living. Sometimes I think or students are led to believe they cannot make money or they cannot be successful in rural Iowa. I think people are telling them that.
Not true.
And
I mean, it's just not.
it's not. It's not true. But how do we dispel that, or how do we get that information out?
That's a good question. I mean, the law school professor I mentioned earlier said to me when I told him I think I'm going to go back to Iowa and look in small towns. He said, Mr. Mahaffey, he said, you will make a good living in small towns. Now, he said, there will be people in cities that make more money than you, but there will be people in cities that are hungrier than junkyard dogs. And he said, you will be part of the community, and you will, you'll do fine. You have to you have to experience it to some extent to know that. And I'm not saying that you start out making a bunch of money. The first couple of years I was on my own, I didn't make that much money at all. But there's always people that are there to help you. And you never do it on your own. And as time goes on, somebody will give you a chance. I remember a farmer that came in and said, we went to so-and-so who retired, and he said, I know you're a young lawyer, but he said, I was a young farmer at one time, so I'm going to give you a chance. That's, you develop those relationships, and as you do that, if you do well for them.
You put in the work.
You put in the work, of course. People are very loyal in rural Iowa. They just really are, Kathy.
Yeah.
They'll stick with you.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest things that I've found.
Yeah.
So is there any advice you would give to younger attorneys?
Well, to those that are looking to come to Iowa, regardless of where they want to go, I mean, take a look at rural Iowa, but we come to Iowa. We need lawyers in Iowa. You can make a good living here. You can also have a good quality of life. I mean, you just can. Our children enjoyed going to a rural school. They got a chance to do all kinds of things. Not just, they were in athletics, they were in speech and drama. A couple of them were on national FFA business management teams. One finished second in the nation, and one was a national champion. There aren't too many schools where you can be a national champion in Iowa.
Yeah,
Kathy.
That's great. That's wonderful. And like you mentioned, they can have experiences
Right.
that aren't always available.
Right.
That's great, Mike. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for
coming on today. I really
be with you
appreciated
today.
that. And
All right.
we've known each other for years, and it's
Years.
just been an honor to
Yeah.
be able to sit down with you. So
Likewise.
thank you. This is Kathy Law, and this has been Law on a Gravel Road. Thank you, and look for our further podcasts. Thank you.